Yes, just before we get started, I did just want to do a land acknowledgement since I am in Canada and thus colonialized territory or colonized territory. So I just wanted to acknowledge that because I'm in Manitoba, I'm going to do this for our peoples. I just wanted to acknowledge that we are virtually gathered on ancestral lands, Treaty 1 territory, and the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. Acknowledging this truth is important, but only a small part in cultivating strong relationships with Indigenous communities. And I think now I'll turn back to Amanda to formally introduce what we're going to be doing today.
Thanks. Thanks, Natalie, and thanks everyone for joining us. So I'm really looking forward to having the luxury of 2 hours for this workshop. So Natalie, Laura, Hannah and myself ran this at the Being Human Festival a few weeks ago, and we only had an hour and a half. We could have done with more time for the drawing. So really pleased that we've got some time and time for a coffee break, which is really great. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Amanda Potter. I'm a research fellow at the Open University and love doing creative stuff, although I'm not a great drawer. And so some of you'll remember last year at the AIMS conference, we did a creative writing workshop, and I thought it would be great to do a comic drawing workshop this year. So I think I can speak for myself and Natalie that we're really just doing a little introduction, and then we're going to have fun and draw with the rest of you. So please have an open mind. Honestly, your drawing won't be as bad as mine. Practice gets you better, as Hannah told me, I remember right at the beginning when I first met her at another conference. And so this has given us a chance just to be creative and practice. So we're just going to, Natalie and I are going to spend a few minutes just on a little bit of what we've been doing with comics, as we used as an introduction at the Being Human workshop. And I probably should say about the Being Human Festival, for those of you that don't know, it's the festival of the humanities for universities in the UK. So it's a general public available, people can book on for free activities, and is a really good thing to support. So we just got a number of people who just joined because they were interested, which is great fun. So this really was written for a general audience, but will work just as well for a group of academics. And we hope that some of you might be able to take away and bring into your classrooms, which would be amazing. So anyway, that's me. I'll hand over to Natalie to just say hi properly.
Yes, hi again. You all know me fairly well. Sorry, I had a bit of a mind fart about who I am, but I'm just finishing up my doctorate at the University of Bristol, teaching here in Canada at the University of Winnipeg, and oh yes, and quite involved with AIMS. I'm the membership outreach committee chair and the chair of the nominations committee, which we're going to announce the results of our election this year in a few days, which is very exciting. And I also just wanted to share off in honor of this workshop, I am wearing my Wonder Woman shirt. And she
and I haven't got mine on today. How rubbish am I?
I know, Amanda, I'm disappointed in you.
Need to go and change. No, I've been working right up until now. It's kind of the busiest week. In my work, it's the busiest week of the year. So I'm afraid I haven't managed to put a bit of Liffey on. That's about as far as I got.
And then we'll pass over to Laura.
Shall we pass to Laura? Yeah, Laura.
Hi. So I'm a teacher in the UK, and I teach classical civilization to GCSE and A-level kids, and I do Great Myth comics, which I started about 7.5 years ago to try and illustrate some of the concepts that my students were learning about. And I still doing that and occasionally doing lovely workshops. My primary mission is to get everyone drawing with stick figures, because they're great and they have no faces, so you don't need to know how they're feeling, you just need to look at their body language, and that's something we'll talk about a bit later. And I'll hand over to Hannah.
Hi, my name's Hannah Sackett. I am a cartoonist and writer and researcher, currently based in Stockholm in Sweden. And I've made quite a few comics about archaeology and history and folklore. And I think everyone should have a go at drawing. Right, I'll hand back to Amanda.
All right, thank you. And in a new innovation since our last workshop, and perhaps partly for Natalie, I went to have fake Christmas at some of my friends' house the other week, and my secret Santa present was a Wonder Woman that talks and gives you advice. Sometimes you can't really understand it, and sometimes it is advice. So I just thought we ought to have advice for the workshop, but it might take a couple of presses to get something coherent. So here we go. It's up to us to do what we can. I love that. It's up to us to do what we can, says Wonder Woman. So there we go. Actually, that's a really good way to start, isn't it, for us for today? So thank you, Wonder Woman, for that good advice. I couldn't have set that up better myself, could I? Right. So I'm just going to do host disabled screen sharing. I don't seem to be able to share my screen. Oh, here we go. It's working now.
You can share your screen, Amanda.
I can share it now. Okay. Yeah, good. Right. Okay. So we've done the first bit, and forgive us this. Forgive me particularly. This was really, we just wanted to give a bit of a whistle-stop tour of Greek mythology and comics. And so starting off really, so some of you will know about this, and if Tony was still here, he will know more about this than me, having not worked on some of these comics. But really, always thinking about Greek mythology and superheroes are kind of linked very much together. And we might think about Superman with his laser eyes like the thunderbolts of Zeus, or we might think about the Flash with his extreme running powers being like Hermes Mercury. But actually in the 1940s it was the Marvel universe that really took on the Greek gods in their own personas. And so we had Thor, and in Thor we had Zeus, and in fact some of you will know that in the next Thor movie we have the lovely Russell Crowe as Zeus. Very much looking forward to that one, although he is getting on a little bit, aren't we all? And then we had a Mercury comic in the Marvel universe, and also the most interestingly funny one was Venus, and this came out, a comic where the goddess Venus came to Earth. And so really we have, as I say, those people actually coming in, and those gods joining us. But the one that I'm really interested in, as you can probably tell, although I don't have my t-shirt on, is Wonder Woman. So needs no introduction. And so the Amazonian warrior from 1941, where we had William Moulton Marston brought Wonder Woman to our attention, and really drawing on the mythology of the Amazons, but also giving her if we look at the first sensation comic from 1941, she drawing on the strengths and the of all the different gods. So she's as lovely as Aphrodite, as wise as Athena, the speed of Mercury and the strength of Hercules. So we're mixing our gods and our heroes here really, but Wonder Woman has it all. And interestingly, though, in the early representations of Wonder Woman, very much linked to Marston's interest in BDSM, and she's always getting tied up. And I like this: you can do better with fewer clothes. Well, I don't know about whether I can. It's a little bit cold in the UK today, but really a long skirt doesn't take you very far if you're kicking ass. And then just really thinking about Wonder Woman and feminism, and dare I do a plug, Natalie, here? Maybe I will do it, seeing as we've got the cover. So Miss magazine was launched in 1972, and Gloria Steinem was very keen to bring back the old Wonder Woman. And so what had happened to Wonder Woman in the 60s, late 60s, early 70s, was her superpowers were taken away from her. Her spangly outfit was taken away. She became kind of a Avengers, Emma Peel kind of spy who owned a clothes shop, and Gloria Steinem thought this was a real, this was not looking to the Wonder Woman that feminists in the 70s wanted to bring back. And so she came on the cover of the first Ms. magazine, Wonder Woman for President. And we might think actually Wonder Woman for President or Prime Minister might be a great thing. Certainly Wonder Woman for Prime Minister is what perhaps we need in the UK right now. So moving swiftly on then, what's happened to Wonder Woman more recently? In 2016, it was the it was the 75th anniversary of Marston's comic coming out and the character, and we had a number of different Wonder Woman versions of Wonder Woman. So the graphic novel by Grant Morrison, very much looking back to the past of the BDSM. Here we have Wonder Woman in chains, but some beautiful drawing by Yannick Paquette in that Earth One graphic novel. My very favourite, Renee Delice's Legend of Wonder Woman, more child-friendly version here, showing Wonder Woman growing up. And a shame that it didn't continue. But Delise and Rachel and her partner kind of had a parting of ways with DC Comics, so didn't carry on, but it is a very beautiful one and one of my favourites. And then we had Greg Rucka's Wonder Woman Rebirth, very much drawing on the Amazon myths, and there's a really interesting kind of interlude comic in this one where we have Barbara Ann Minerva, the archaeologist, finding out the old artifacts of the Amazons and proving that they really existed. So really interesting one there. But not everybody kind of loved Wonder Woman in 2016, and the UN had this really good idea that we'd make Wonder Woman the UN ambassador for women's equality, and there was a big protest against this because of Wonder Woman being white and being very thin and having a lot of cleavage. Does Wonder Woman really stand for all women? But could any woman stand for all women, or could any man stand for all men after that? And so Wonder Woman was very quickly withdrawn from being the UN ambassador under an apology that she was only expected to be doing it temporarily, and a bit of a shame, but understand kind of people's opinions. And also a bit of controversy that Greg Rucka made the statement that of course Wonder Woman had relationships with other women, and on an island with other women, what else would anybody do? And so actually, you know, Wonder Woman as a lesbian, was that a really shock horror? Probably not. I tend to think of Wonder Woman as loving people, not just men or women or trans people. She just loves people, and I think that's absolutely fine with her. So moving it up to date, and then I'm going to rush on. So Wonder Woman continues into 2021. Just wanted to share this very new comic series, Nubia and the Amazons. Here we have the protagonist is a Black Amazon in Themyscira, and we also have the first transgender Amazon who is one of the warrior women there. And so this comic series is just out at the moment, and Natalie and I are reading it as it's coming out. So still people are using Wonder Woman for looking at, for really in the forefront of identity. And we can, all of us, perhaps, you know, back in 2016, could she represent all women? Can Amazons represent all women? I think it continues to be thinking about gender representation, and Wonder Woman and the Amazons are a good way to read through that and think about it. And what I did want to say, I said I would do a shameless plug. So Natalie didn't have to twist my arm very much to say, could we do a online conference next summer on Wonder Woman? And because it's going to be 50 years since the Ms. magazine, so back to my, here we go in the bottom right hand corner, Wonder Woman for President, then we're going to be organising a Wonder Woman for President 2022, 50 years on, and the CFP has just gone out. So if anybody would like to write about Wonder Woman, please get in touch with us, because we're looking forward to it. But I guess that's just some of the some comics from the past that I wanted to share a little bit with you, and share our mutual love of Wonder Woman. And so now I'm going to pass on to Natalie, who's going to bring us right up to date with some different kinds of comics.
Lovely. Thank you, Amanda. I'll just get you to stop sharing your screen if you don't mind.
Oh yes, do I need to stop?
Perfect. So I'm going to speak just very briefly. I mean, many of us are classicists or ancient Mediterranean historians here. So most of us are probably aware, in the very least, of Lore Olympus. And if not that, you're probably aware of just how huge the Hades Persephone fandom is. I know many of my students have come to me or have been interested in classics and comics, which is what I'm teaching here, because of just the prevalence of this fandom online. It's described as the most popular het fic from Greek mythology. These are two fan creation sites. The first one is an archive of our own, which is fan fiction. And you can just see how many works there are written about Hades and Persephone, just the Greek characters. And then of course, DeviantArt, which is for people who can draw and paint far better than I can. And again, you just see how many people are taking inspiration from these two Greek characters and their relationship. As a comics person who studies comics, no more do you, I'm particularly interested, of course, in where you see Hades and Persephone in webcomics. And quite frankly, it is everywhere. These are 7 examples. It's not exhaustive either. But part of why I wanted to share this is because I'm aware most of the audience is going to be aware of the story of Hades and Persephone, or as it should be better known, the story of Demeter. And one thing I love here is you see some similarity between characters. Hades seems to really like to look like Severus Snape a lot, but you also see just some really, really unique examples of these characters with the way people have looked to this particular ancient relationship, and been inspired to create these characters in various ways. And so that's what we're doing today is looking at the ancient world and coming up with artistic representations. And so I thought that's where I would start. Of course, with Hades and Persephone, there are a lot of these webcomics, I should say, a lot of these stories follow some very similar beats that do break from tradition. Amy Hines, of course, famously wrote an article about the way the rape is divorced from most of these stories. And that is true of the webcomics, with the exception of Lore Olympus. That does maintain itself as a survivor story. Most of these iterations are, I don't like this term, but really quite fluffy in a positive way. They're heartwarming. These are romances that make you smile. And we may dislike it, or we may like it as reception studies people, but this is sort of, again, what we're doing today. We're looking at these ancient stories and going, well, how can we make this into a story that appeals to us? And how can we make these characters appeal to us in some way? And part of, I think one of the main ways we see this in the Hades and Persephone in webcomics is the way it turns, invariably these stories are coming of age stories for Persephone. Demeter is almost always presented as a helicopter parent, which you see in this third one here. This is from Punderworld. And often you see Persephone as a young girl initially, either meeting Hades or being threatened by other male Greek gods or Greek heroes or Greek characters. As you can see here, she's being threatened by a centaur. But again, it's just because you have so many, I think, young women, and all of the webcomics that I pictured here have been drawn by young women who are, again, looking to this ancient character, seeing reflections of themselves and writing about it. So that's just a very, very quick whistle-stop tour of Hades and Persephone in webcomics, but I just wanted to do a brief talk about it, again, to introduce us to just this idea of breaking away from canon and how we can tell our own stories that are still also seeded from the ancient world. So I'll turn back to Amanda, and thank you.
Thanks, Natalie. And look what arrived on my doorstep yesterday. Hooray! So I've read some of it online, but I still prefer a book. So I'm looking forward to this, one of my many Christmas readings. So when we did this workshop with the group from as part of the Being Human Festival, we were very keen that we went through all the different Greek gods and goddesses and gave them a big grounding in so that they could base their characters and their stories on Greek gods or goddesses or heroes. And Laura has pulled together some amazing information that we'll be sharing, and we've got a Google Drive with everything kept in, and so we can probably tailor it, can't we, Laura, when we get to that bit for this audience who'll know more, so we'll have a bit more drawing time. But really we wanted to start off just by getting your creative juices flowing. So Hannah's going to start us off with a little drawing exercise. So has everybody got a pad and a pencil handy?
All right, just grab something to draw with. And Okay, is that sharing now?
Yes, thanks.
Is that okay? Can everyone see?
Yeah, good.
Okay, lovely. So yeah, you should be. Oh, wait a minute. Sorry. Okay, that's better. Right, so this is just a quick drawing exercise to get everyone kind of moving their hands around the page and not kind of stressing too much about their drawing. Some of you might be really experienced at drawing, some of you might not have picked up a pencil and drawn for a very long time. So this is an exercise used by Linda Barry and Ivan Brunetti, cartoonists who have written books on learning to draw. And essentially what I want you to do is I'm going to give you a few minutes to draw this picture. And this is really an observation drawing. So I want you to spend a few minutes drawing the temple, taking notice of its shapes and its forms. And it doesn't matter when the time's up whether or not you finish the drawing. I'm just going to start a timer now to remind myself. But if you get drawing, I'm going to give you a few minutes. And I'll give you a yell when the time's up. Okay.
I was going to try and avoid the thing I fell into last time, which was spending way too much time on the middle one, but now I've already redrawn it 3 times, so that's clearly not going to work. Oh man, already used my rubber too many times. How long have we got, Hannah?
I'm deliberately not telling you.
Oh. Sorry, I thought I'd missed something.
No, just for this, you've got about a minute left.
Okay,
But
okay.
you really don't need to finish this drawing.
I really do. I did it last time.
Just at the minute, it's a relaxed drawing.
Yeah.
Okay, so if everybody wants to stop now, and it doesn't matter whether or not you finished your drawing, but it's just a good chance for you to get a good look at the image and to make a nice observation of it. What we're going to do now is we're going to draw the temple again. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you less time to draw your picture, and this time I do want you to try and get the form of the whole temple onto the page in the time that I give you. So don't worry so much about the details of it and try and focus on the outlines and the impression of the building. So I'm going to give you a minute and a half to draw this all over again. And that minute and a half starts now. It's longer than you think, so you don't need to rush like crazy. And stop. Okay, it doesn't matter if you haven't finished. And what we're going to do now is we're going to draw it all over again. This time I am going to give you 45 seconds to draw the temple. So maybe start with the central piece and then see how much you can get done in 45 seconds, starting now. And stop. Okay. We are going to go again. This time I'm going to give you 20 seconds. And at this point, we're really just interested in giving the impression of a temple, because you're not going to get all of this drawn in 20 seconds. So focus on the part of the building that sums up the entirety of it the best you can, and have your pencils ready. And we're going to start 20-second drawing now. And stop. Okay. Okay, we are going to try the same thing again at 10 seconds. Okay, hold your pencils ready. No starting till I say, and go. 10 seconds. And stop. Okay. And then, oh, doesn't want to stop. Okay, and then just for fun, we'll try it on 5 seconds and see how much you can get drawn. 5 seconds beginning now. And stop. Okay, so you should have, these are my quick ones, I don't know if you can see on the page here. So you should have a page of something like this, or maybe you've drawn them on different pages, that's fine. So the point of this is, oh, lovely. And we do have a shared folder when people want to, if people want to draw their pictures later, we'll give the link again. And you can upload things, take photos and upload them if you want into the folder. The point of this exercise is, so you can have a really detailed, beautiful drawing in a comic, but honestly, people spend a few seconds looking at panels in a comic, so you can spend hours and days on it, and some people do, but the reader is going to over it really fast. And actually, if that image is too detailed and it's too complex, then the reader is going to actually struggle to take in the visual information alongside the written information in the comic fast enough. So actually, one of the things that you want with the comic is something that's very recognizable. You want to be able to go, oh, that's the temple. Okay, I can see what that is. And maybe all those beautiful details that academics want to study, for the reader, you know, it's getting that impression. And the other thing about drawing really quickly like this is you don't have time to think about it, and you have to draw with quite a lot of energy. If once you were down to like 20 seconds, you've really got to get that pencil onto the paper and draw with some oomph. And sometimes some of the loveliest drawings are drawings that have energy in them rather than just being technically perfect. And of course, everyone's got different styles. Some artists' work is that technical precision that's really beautiful and stunning about their work, but other people may have very wonky drawings, but it's got so much energy and liveliness in it that that's what's engaging. So it gives you a chance to find out what sort of artist are you. Want someone that wants to make it really precise and measured, or do you like that thing of putting a lot of energy into your drawing? So it gives you options for how you want to make your comics. So hopefully that's got you limbered up and ready for thinking about characters and comic making. So I'm going to hand over to Laura now, who's going to get us to think a bit about the characters that we might put in. I will stop sharing my screen.
Thanks, Hannah. Right, I'm going to attempt to share mine. I've forgotten where the button is. And let's see, share screen. Right, so my let me get this going before I actually start talking, because despite being a teacher, I am failing to multitask right now. And no, I don't want to try that. Thank you. Play from camera. Look, great. So hopefully everyone can see that. So I started drawing with stick figures because, like Hannah says, you can draw them really quickly and there's lots of energy in the figure. And the symbolic details are really the immediate thing. They are what tell people exactly what they're looking at. You see the same thing on Greek pottery and sort of Roman frescoes. As long as you can see a couple of symbols, you know who that character is and you can know what myth they're referring to pretty much straight away. So the other lovely thing about stick figures is you can tell stories really easily with them because it's very easy to own a stick figure. There's no face, so it's less of a challenge to draw for a start, and it's also less of a challenge to get exactly those details of the face right, how you think everyone thinks they look and what facial expression they are. And you can put more focus on the symbols and the story that focus here. This is, I suppose, on the symbols that the Olympian gods, just to focus on these, look, have and use. I'm not going to go through the whole thing in detail like before, because obviously I'll be preaching to the choir here. So, but this is a little family tree that I knocked up for my class originally, so they could really focus on the symbols, because one of the things they have to do at GCSE level is be able to identify a god immediately and then say why it's that god, what it is about it that tells them that story. So we start off with Zeus, supreme father of gods and men, and he is bearded on a throne, and there is an eagle or a thunderbolt generally with him. He is famous for, as we know, quite a lot of things, his sexual potency being one of the primary causes of an awful lot of myths. And we have the great birth story that goes with him too. So these things can be brought in as symbols as well. This is one of the most famous stories where we see him, he's got his thunderbolt and he's got Athene coming out of his head, and Hephaestus standing on one side with his axe. You know immediately what story is going on here, or it could be even, in fact, Athene's story. Immediately you know who is being born from his head. If we move on to his lovely wife, Hera, his sister wife, she has a scepter. Well, she's the queen. She makes a lot of deal about being the queen. A diadem, again, she's the queen. And then there's the peacock from one of her most enduring myths of her and Argus. She's meant to be famous for sharing brother and being goddess of childbirth and marriage and women, which seems so inappropriate compared to how she actually acts and how she is in her marriage, or rather how she's forced to be. And she has a very similar birth story to her husband as well, although she's possibly linked to this early Mycenaean Earth Mother goddess. So she's really important, and my students really like her more than they used to, I think, now that, times have changed. They can see the focus on her instead. And so one of the stories of Hera that immediately gets recognized is her with perhaps a little bird, which tells the story of the wooing, to put it nicely, of Zeus to Hera. So I've already put this in the shared file in case anyone wants to read any of these slides in a bit more detail. But if we move on to Poseidon, and do apologize if I'm distracted, I think my daughter's just woken up. So the Earthshaker, tamer of horses and god of the sea, he is of course shown with his trident, his fishing implement, sometimes with a net, because those two things go together when fishing. He's also shown sometimes on horseback, or perhaps with a hippocamp, or horse of the sea, or with a horse or a dolphin or a fish. And he represents these elemental forces, the storms, the waves, the earthquakes, with the horses, possibly a link to that idea, hooves making the sound of the waves, or perhaps the earth moving. And where he doesn't end up sort of being in a lot of myths, he is linked to a lot of other imagery, and the sea, of course, being ever so important. And he has the same birth story as his brothers and sisters so far. So here we see him, he is pursuing a maiden, although very leisurely in that image. Trident, we know it's him, because without the trident, it's a fair chance that could be Zeus. Other images, again, this one I picked out because it's very difficult to tell who it is. In up here with the goddess sitting and a winged goddess of victory, Nike, and then you just see his trident, so you assume it's Poseidon. But here, helper a fisherman, look, he has a fish, thus it is Poseidon. So a much faster way of working him out. Hades, now I do include him in the Olympians, although we do talk about him being a chthonic god. And I think it's appropriate because we've been talking about him just now as well. And interestingly enough, his symbols tend to be kind of difficult to make out. He's bearded, he's male, he's seated, he's got a scepter often. The one I've pictured here is from a very famous piece of pottery where it's a little bird on the top, possibly linked between life and death. But the most interesting image we see him with is Cerberus, his three-headed dog, so that they can scare off living people from the underworld and chase people into the right part of the underworld. But his most famous story is, of course, the rape of Persephone, the abduction of Persephone, and the confusion of Demeter. And there is a whole section that I teach, Journeying to the Underworld, which has the story of this as part of the Greek mythology of the underworld. So that does tend to be the place where he is shown. And so often we see him with her instead of it being all about him. It's who he's with Persephone, as well as occasionally with Cerberus as well. Moving on to Demeter, whose daughter he steals, so mother of the earth, she gets pictured with corn, or the cornucopia, although that's sort of a roundabout way. That comes from the story of Zeus and Amalthea, the nanny goat. But the idea that she is goddess of plenty as long as you keep her happy. And then sometimes with a torch, and the torch immediately tells us about the story of her looking for her daughter, while her daughter has been abducted and cannot be found. So here we have her, again, shown with the ears of corn, or with sometimes, in this one, a very, very small cornucopia, I believe. So there's not a lot to define her if she's not holding her particular objects, unlike with many of the other goddesses. Artemis, for example, immediately recognizable with her bow and arrows. Sometimes she's shown with a long dress and animal skins, but later on we see her with a shorter tunic. It's caught up around her knees so that she can run like Wonder Woman, divesting herself of garments so she can kick ass more easily, and with a stag or dogs, which is both a link to hunting and one of her famous stories, the story of her punishment of Actaeon, whom she turns into a stag because he sees her naked. So she's this benevolent matronly figure, although she's also eternal virgin and retains her power in this way. So a wild goddess, shorter tunic is a bit of a hint for that, I suppose. And so we see her immediately with her objects. She's very visible, but this middle image, the only thing really that immediately marks her out, having lost a hand and maybe lost a bow in the process or arrows, is her pulled up skirt and her shoes, her running sandals. So there is a symbol there, but it takes us just slightly longer to get who this is meant to be a representation of than in the other images where she has a stag or a hunting dog and her bow and arrow in each of them. Apollo, very, very similarly, even though he is the god of so many things, list, he is shown again with his bow and arrow because that is the fastest way to get from image to Apollo. And the fact that he's naked, or at least just slightly robed, his other most important thing, where he's the most Greek of all gods and a beautiful god and the ideal of Greek male beauty. So even though he's a god of medicine and music and prophecy and justice in a way, those don't tend to get pictured because they're not as easy to make out. So sometimes we have him with musical instruments, but again, is that actually Apollo? Here, though, we know it's Apollo because he's also with his sister, and these poor people have been shot with arrows, perhaps metaphorically or with plague. So quite easy to make out as long as you picture him as well directly as possible. The ideal of manly beauty, as we have, I do love to remind my students that he would have been painted in. They're not sure about his green hair in this image. Now, Athene is probably the most easy female god to identify because she is fully armed, and we don't get images of women fully armored. So even though she's a goddess of wisdom, and for men that is warfare, and for women that seems to be weaving, we don't really see her get pictured with a loom. We see her with her armor and with her gorgoneon and the aegis as well. And we see lots and lots of images of her because of Athens and her patronage of Athens as well. And we saw her earlier as well. And sometimes we see her with her teeny tiny owl, the Athene Noctua, and sometimes with her champions, such as here, Hercules or Heracles, whom she favours because of his cleverness, or vice versa. And the Aegis, which is pictured in numerous ways, but always seems to include a snaky, tassely effect. So all of these images, you can get immediately that this woman is not only average woman, she is Athene. Some more images as well with the Gorgoneon, so that we can see them more clearly. So there's a lot of focus on that in archaic art. Hermes, another one who is pretty instant when we come to see him. Again, he's normally shown fully grown and bearded, which doesn't really mark him out from the other male gods, but his wide-brimmed travelling hat, his winged sandals, and his caduceus, his traveller staff or his messenger's staff, do. So he is obviously the messenger of the gods, and he has this other role as the psychopomp, the leader of souls to the underworld, and also then being patron of thieves. So we have the Herm, the statues outside the house to protect, sort of a potropaic measure to protect against thieves and protect these boundaries of the home. And he has this very sneaky birth story as well. But in the images where we see him with this, I always have to explain what this is. It looks like he's got a sun on his shoulder, but no, it's his hat, which is blown off his head, which looks a bit like this, although the neck of the pot there is receding, so it looks a bit flat. And his boots tend to look a bit like actors' buskins with big wings on the side of them, and this fabulous long tongue, which my students actually thought made it look rather like a bird, which it does. And his caduceus, which has the two snakes rather than just one. Dionysus, another god who's generally quite easy to identify very quickly, whether or not he's shown as old or young. He tends to be shown as both of those, more young in Greek imagery than the older version that we see, very jolly looking chap in Roman imagery. We see him with immediately vines, grapes, and a drinking cup, and sometimes as well in skins linking to the outside world and the wilderness, and with his pine cone staff, the thyrsus. So we see him in images that represent the Bacchic cults and the Dionysia festival. And we don't get a lot of images of his birth. I suppose that's quite difficult to make out that he is inside the thigh of Zeus, whereas with Athene, it's much easier to immediately show her jumping out of Zeus's head. So it's quite interesting. Here with his satyrs and his maenads, the other figures that are a shortcut to showing who it is immediately, because they share with him his revelry and his delightful ivy, or as my students point out, is a line with some dots. Yes, it is, but it's still identifiable. Aphrodite, my image here is not so great, to be honest. It's one of the earliest images I drew, and it sort of harks back to very traditional images of Aphrodite as a goddess of love, sex and beauty and fertility. Here she looks ever so innocent, but she does have a dove, which is one of the birds that's particularly appropriate to her. We certainly see that in the Aeneid, where the doves are sent by Venus to her son in order to let him know that she's with him. And sometimes with her belt of desire, which appears in the Iliad, one of these slightly MacGuffin-like objects associated with her. Sometimes, though, we see her with her lovers, or a mirror to suggest beauty, an apple to link with the story of the apple of discord, or a myrtle wreath or sprigs, which both links to the story of mirror, but also to the act of love, because that's part of the wedding ceremony, and myrtle wreath would have been worn by women on their wedding day. So she's also shown with Eros, the representation of love. So she's more sex, he's love, that little baby who shoots arrows at you, innocence and violence all in one. And of course, her birth story is one of the most pictured birth stories. That tells us immediately who she is. So sometimes as well with white birds, not just the dove, but sometimes the swan and a boob, as my students like to say. This one, I gave them this one. Oh, is that Aphrodite? Oh yes, we can see a boob. Oh, and that looks like a tiny vulture, but maybe it's meant to be a dove. So they were able to identify her from here, and the erotes and the myrtle wreaths. And here she is in her shell, coming out from the sea as she is born, with Eros by her side, and the sea represented by Poseidon, or possibly Triton in this image. And there's a fish, just to remind us that she comes from the sea. Hephaestus, another god who sometimes it's difficult to make out because he's traditionally meant to have been crippled either from birth or from his fall from Olympus, caused either by Hera or by Zeus. And yet sometimes we see him standing, or not seated at least, and not supported. So as long as he, however, has his hammer or his double-headed axe or some other tool, perhaps hanging up in the background as if we were in his workshop, or something he has just made, we tend to be able to recognize him. Or sometimes he is supported by artificial supports, seated or with a donkey, from the story of him being brought back to Olympus. So he is this outsider god, but as we like to talk about in class, he reminds us what humans might not have been able to survive that great fall from Olympus, but he's an immortal. And even though he might not be able to walk, he's still the most talented of all the gods in creating beautiful things. So he has this other lovely skill. And we do see him as a side character in quite a lot of the epics, where he is able to make armor for the hero and highlight them as being helped by the gods. So here are the images we tend to look at in class. Here he is standing, but this could be Zeus or Poseidon until we notice his double-headed axe. This image is one of my favorite ones in his fabulous flying wheelchair to describe it. And again, even though he's already in this, he still has his double-headed axe or possibly a hammer. And here, in one of the most enduring images, we see him giving it to Thetis, the armor that is, with some greaves hanging up behind, and she's going to give this to her son as Achilles later on. And Venus does a very similar thing in the Aeneid, where she goes and collects armor to give to Aeneas. But you know that already. Now, Ares. Ares is the god of war. That's pretty much it. We tend to see him as an armored male, and unless his name is next to him or it's very obvious that he's a god, he could be any soldier. So a spear, a helmet, sometimes, very rarely, a chariot drawn by 4 fire-breathing horses, which never seem to be actually breathing fire in the image, which I found very disappointing. And sometimes with a serpent or a vulture or a woodpecker or a barn owl or an eagle owl. So these animals are meant to be very linked with him. Or a firebrand, not for looking around and finding a way, but for burning cities down. So yes, being a god of all the things that are associated with war, particularly the violence of it, and his story of having an affair with Aphrodite. So occasionally he's pictured with Aphrodite, or at least next to Aphrodite, while Hephaestus is on the other side. So while he's kind of easy to picture, he's easy also to get confused with other people. When we see him, as you can see, he is a warrior. And so, like we say, unless it's really obvious that he's a god, we need to make sure that he is pictured as a warrior, and his name perhaps next to him too, or with these other images. Hestia, now we're getting near the end now. Well done for keeping up. So Hestia is the goddess of the hearth, the house, the family, and for some reason there's a big gap there, and the state. She came to represent the state and the good running of the state. But as you can see, she's pretty much just a woman, and she is seen as a young woman, virginal, modestly veiled, although women would mostly be veiled. She is veiled as if to say, you know, she's married to the hearth, and sometimes holding a flowered branch or a kettle, sort of domestic images of the hearth and the home, and I suppose as well, just sort of happiness and domesticity. And even though she's the first to be born and the last to be disgorged, so she's the oldest and the youngest, she is distanced from Olympians. She steps down to allow Dionysus, rather like a sort of metaphor for Greek culture coming along and no longer worshipping just the hearth and heat and cooking, but now having theatre and wine and other culture. And in her images, again, she's quite difficult to make out. For example, in this image, there's a lot of boob there. That seems to be a bit confusing. In this image as well, she's just holding a flower. Could she be Demeter? So she's difficult to make out unless you're putting in immediately visible image of or at least fire. So with those, I've lost my last couple of slides, it seems. I shall try and open those in a second. With those images, you can kind of see how, if you're going to start with those, they could be a good place to go with. If you pick a god, for example, and start off your story with that god. There we go. Let's press stop sharing here. Sorry about that. And in the Google Drive, there are some templates if you want to skip the bit where you draw a figure and just practice drawing some symbols. And there are also what we're going to do in a minute, some bit of practice on this as well. So if anyone's got any questions about any of those gods in particular or anything that came up, please do let me know. But otherwise, have a think about what it is you might like to start with, or who you might like to start with, if any of those have whetted your appetite. And I'll hand you over to Hannah for the next bit of the drawing practice.
Hi. So can I just check with Amanda on times? Do we want to have people think a little bit about their characters now, or should we carry straight on to do the story and the character together?
So on the original program, we kind of had a little break in the middle. So maybe we could get everybody up on gallery view and people could kind of vote with their little hands what they'd like to do. Do people want, put a coffee symbol up if you want a quick 5 minutes, or if you're all right, don't put anything up. That tests everybody's ability to put a coffee symbol up. Natalie's having a look to see if anybody wants a coffee.
I see 1 cup of coffee.
1 cup of coffee. Everybody else is all right.
Oh, 2 cups of coffee. So I think we might be good to go on. I'm sorry to Paula and Olivia for that.
Yes,
maybe we should let people have 5 minutes. What people can go and think about before they go for coffee is to have a think about your character, whether you're going to use one of the gods, as Laura's just been through, or whether you want to create your own one and who they might be, and you can have that kind of ticking over in the back of your head. What should we do, Amanda? Should we
let's do that. So 5 minutes thinking time, and just while we were doing that, so as I say, I'm drawing challenged, and I started off thinking I was going to do Hestia, because I still think we need to reclaim Hestia and give her something to do. But I ended up with, I don't know if people can see that, a little girl on a beach. So I'm not sure if that's Hestia's secret love child, maybe. So I think maybe she needs a secret love child. So maybe that's where I got to. She kind of appeared on her own and had a little kind of bird in her hand, like Snow White. So that's what came to me, strangely. So maybe you want to think about that. I keep saying I want to do Aphrodite's daughter called Sharon from Brighton, but maybe I still haven't done Sharon from Brighton, but I will do at some point. So 5 minutes thinking time, and we'll be back at just before 10 to 5, or whatever time it is in America.
Or 10 to 10 in
10 to 10,
EST.
okay.
Yeah.
And if people are still here while other people are getting coffee, and that anyone's got questions they want to ask Laura or anybody.
Yeah, I did see something in the chat actually.
Yeah, Roger asked about how you decide on panel sizing, or pardon me, how your panels are arranged, or whether or not they are rectangles or angled blocks. And I think that probably Hannah and Laura, if you talk about that, Roger's gone for coffee. When we talk about making the actual story.
Yeah, we'll talk about that when we'll wait for Roger to come back. That would be
I'm going to grab a coffee too, since we've got a couple minutes.
Okay. Hey, good idea.
Okay, all right.
Shall I put my Wonder Woman t-shirt on then? I want to do that. I'll go and put my Wonder Woman t-shirt on.
Okay, we'll see you back at 10:02 then. So the thing that we're going to do now is based loosely on activity developed by cartoonist Neil Cameron, his stick stories. So go back to Laura's kind of stick characters, a good way of drawing, particularly using kind of blocky rather than your kind of school stick character that might just have a stick for a body, using shapes and then stick arms and legs is a good way to go. And the idea of this is to make a 4-panel comic because it's a really good place to start if you haven't made a comic before. If you have, go for it, do as much as you like in the time we've got. But I think if people haven't done it before, then 4 panels is a really good place to start. If you're doing a 4-panel comic, the thing to think about is how do you condense your story into 4 panels. So here's a really quick one I did of Cinderella. You need to set up your story in your first panel. Who are the characters? What's happening to them? It could be an origin myth for your god or goddess. It could be a myth from part of their canon of stories. So what's going on at the start? Then you need the central part of your story, what happens to them. And then you need your final picture where we have the story kind of folded up. So it's important to think about the kind of key information that you want to share. You don't have much space, so you've got to use small amounts of text and speech in order to get across your story. So just think about that as you're kind of constructing your panels. And just as well, in this case, we don't have masses of time. This is essentially almost more like a storyboard than a finished comic. You don't need to kind of worry about your drawings or how perfect they are. It's when you're drawing a comic for the first time, you have to kind of juggle in your head the images and the words, and so it's a kind of process of working it through. So I'm going to show you now my favorite way of making a 4-panel comic, which is if you're not working in a notebook and you're working on a piece of paper, if you fold your piece of paper in half and half again, and then unfold it, you've got 4 panels to draw your comic in. If you wish to, you can draw panel borders into each of your squares so that you've got nice borders for your comic. Again, they can be quite energetic if you want them to, and you can either do your page this way up or this way up, depending on how many characters you're trying to fit into your panel. And I think we had a question earlier, which I'll let Laura answer as well, about how to know what shape to make your panels and your panel transitions, whether they should have sideways kind of slants or kind of boxes or things jumping out. And really, it's entirely up to you. There are some really established cartoonists that always use like a 6-grid panel, really formal on the page, or 8 panels, and they keep it very strict, and then all the action goes on the side there. And there are other people, and obviously a lot in superhero comics, people like to play with dynamic kind of things, and things going off the page into the gutter, or things kind of cutting into the other panels. And I mean, I would say if you're starting out, keep it simple. But equally, if you're someone that's got an interest in composition or design, and you want to start with the shapes on the page and think about the flow of your story, and that's something that you like to play with, then you can start with that and think about how your story might move around the page. So it really depends whether you feel like confident playing with shapes and images, or if you just want to concentrate on getting your story down in the first place. But I will let Laura talk now about her process of putting together comics. I'm sure she's got some advice on her panel composition.
I know that there's a comic in here that I wanted to use as an example, and I can't believe I find it, but I've got a second one. So with mine, I tended to limit myself to a very tiny piece of paper until I realized that they just got smaller and smaller and smaller. And when I was illustrating the Odyssey, it would very much come with what main points, just as Hannah's picked out, what main points from the text that I wanted to illustrate, because I was doing it in a didactic way. I wanted the kids to be able to understand the flow of the story and the most important things in it. This is the one I've got to hand, which is an uninked version, where this is actually very linear because it's about ancient Greek sacrifice. So it's a very linear process, the sacrifice, and there's a ritual to it. And the irony is you can't actually see where I've drawn the lines, but they're very much sketched in. And I'll basically start at the top, and sometimes if I'm good, I'll use a ruler and I'll work out how deep I want my panels to be. But the rest of the time, I will start with one picture and then I'll feel my way along until I get to the side of the page about what images need to go on which line. So I'm not very good at planning entirely. I won't know how long it is until it's finished. And even if I'm aiming for it to be A4, it tends to end up going on to the next page and needing to be a bit longer than A4, which isn't very practical for printing, unfortunately, but it works out in the end. So this one's quite traditional, and then it's very square panels and going from left to right. But on a lot of the time, I will jump out of the panels. I'm just going to grab another book. Hang on. So this one is Odyssey. And what page is this? This is Circe telling Odysseus what he will encounter. And in the final edit, I've moved these apart because, again, like I said, I got really, really small because I was doing these really fast because I needed to be in school the next day. And the panels have become like a speech, a thought bubble, because she's telling him what's going to happen. And this is all very much full of speech, this image. So in fact, the panels have disappeared and the speech bubbles have taken over. Whereas, say, let's find another one. Yeah, this one where she's turning the men into pigs, the panels are a bit more easy to make out. And then I used this sort of splice down the middle one to show a simile. So what's happening in the actual poem, and then the imagery of the simile next to it, so you can see those two things together. But even then it seems to grow out, and sometimes there's no panel, it's just about the speech bubbles, or sometimes there is a panel and they're starting to break out of the panels too. So I find it's quite a fluid process depending on what the story is and what parts of the story you really want to emphasize. So you can do that with 4 panels because you are picking out the moments to emphasize. But then if you go further, you sort of let it flow from your fingers and see what comes out of it somewhat. You tell us the end of term because I'm just waffly as hell, sorry.
Okay, so basically it's now your chance to make your comic, and we're going to have time now for people to draw, to create your character, or to draw your Greek god or goddess, and to decide what's going to happen to them. So we've got plenty of time, haven't we, Amanda, to sit and draw?
We have. So I was wondering if we gave people half an hour, and then that'll give us quarter of an hour for questions and sharing at the end, if that's
Lovely.
all right with everyone. Yep. Okay. So brilliant.
If it's all right, can I share for a minute I found my final
Oh,
slides.
brilliant. Yes, please share.
Where I've got some more examples of just plain stick figures of other gods, but then also modern figures where, again, it's just about the symbols. I mean, by all means, please do add faces to your characters. It's just not my cup of tea. So I'll share that and just leave it up on screen for a few minutes while people get started, perhaps. So with this one, just some examples of other gods, minor gods perhaps, that you hopefully be able to recognize just from their symbols and their stance as well. Their body language can be very, very quick and easy thing to pick out in order to tell who a character is. So maybe have some little guesses throughout here. And you can do the same thing with non-god characters, with heroes, or actually just with regular people who want to be portrayed in a certain way to be symbolic about who they are. For example, there's me. I'm not entirely sure that I wield the Jupiter's weapon, but I'm definitely happy with my Gorgonean. Athene, give me courage. So like I said, if you want to use the template, it is there if you want to print that off, if you have access to a printer, or just use that. I've just done some different stances. My stick figures have become a little bit less blocky over time. They've now got some inverted triangles to sort of flesh them out a little bit, just because it's easier to put costume and symbols on. But in essence, they're a bunch of squares and circles and lines, and they're really easy to master. So if I leave that up, just the basics of them, is that all right?
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so if people want to turn cameras off, or just and if we'll monitor the chat in case there are any questions.
And just to reiterate, if anybody does want to share their efforts at any point, I've put the link to our Google Drive in the chat. And if you want to post any of the things you do today on social media, just if you wouldn't mind using the hashtag for the conference, which is Antiquity Now, that would be great.
Amanda, are you drawing Hestia this time?
Amanda, I think you're muted.
Oh.
I am, but I don't know how the story ends. The Olympians have gone off to have a picnic and forgot about Hestia. And so Aphrodite's dove says, while they're away, shall we have a party? But I don't know what a dove and Hestia are going to do at this party. I'm really struggling.
They
What
could
are you
burn
doing?
down Olympus.
Yeah. What are you doing, Natalie?
Oh, I decided to run with Laura's offense about Ares's horse's lack of fire breathing, and
Oh, nice.
and
Oh,
Ares
that's
is angry at them for not breathing fire, and they argue that it's bad for their breath, and so he invents Ares brand gum for them. Very silly. What about you, Hannah?
I've come up with it was all the owls and the birds. So I've come up with she's Mavis, mother of birds.
Oh, wonderful.
Oh, that's lovely.
So I'm coming up with the story of how she created the birds in the forest.
Oh,
I'm
I love
working on it.
Natalie, I just posted a question into the chat for you that came from somebody else. It's an interesting question about how a creator of comics chooses which attributes within a story to feature in a story.
That's a really interesting question. I'm really sorry, my cat is attacking something valuable. Just give me a quick moment.
Oh man.
Sorry. It's a really interesting question because as Hannah and Laura were saying, so often it's important in comics, which I mean, you see this in all sorts of comic scholarship. Scott McCloud talks about it a lot, about how what the artist should focus on in any particular frame is what should draw the reader's attention, because if it's too busy, if there's too much going on, readers won't know what to focus on. And so often you'll find that it's what's most applicable to the character, of course, what's most applicable to the character in a particular point. And I keep really wanting to recommend this to everybody because it's beautiful. But Kelly DeConnick just did a comic of Wonder Woman Historia about the origin of the Amazons, and it's one of the most beautiful comics I've ever seen. And in her depiction of Hera, who's one of the main characters, the driver of a lot of what's going on, she's almost always depicted with the peacock feathers. And that's because in this particular comic, the big thrust of Hera's character is on her having eyes everywhere and on her seeing everything that's going on and sort of being this character behind the scenes who pulls strings and gets things done. Of course, also the peacock feathers are beautiful and they make her look awesome. So I think it's sort of a combination of what do you want to highlight about the particular character versus what just looks really good. And if you look at, for example, different depictions of the Cyclops, of course, they always have the one eye, but so often, again, other characteristics will be featured depending on how they want to be represented. So in the wonderful Cyclopedia Exotica, which presents the Cyclops as living in a modern day North American society as sort of a discriminated group of people, their humanity is really focused on. Of course, they have one eye, and the women have one breast, but they're simplistically drawn. I mean, that's partially the artist's style, but they're more simplistically drawn to draw the readers, to make the reader relate more to them, versus say and these again are very diverse art styles, but in Matt Fraction and Christian Ward did Odyssey, which is the gender bending Odyssey where all of the male characters are female. And in that, again, you have the Cyclops, who is this really horrific creature with exaggerated female characteristics. So she has huge layers of breasts, and she's quite big. And I mean, that of course brings up huge issues of fat shaming and, you know, the horrific, Jesus, I can't say it, making the female body something horrific. But again, it really goes for what you're trying to evoke in the reader is really the first thing you want to think of. Sorry, that was a very long answer.
No, I love it. I love it. I don't know either of those particular adaptations of the Cyclops that you're talking about, but they're opposite ends of a spectrum, right? I mean,
they are, absolutely. Yeah.
Really fascinating. And so the question in particular that came was it had to do with Iliad or Odyssey. Just I think our the Inquirer was tossing these out. How does the artist know which part of the story is important? And I think I think the artist foregrounds within the creation the elements of the story that are important to him or her.
Absolutely. And that's
and so if I can follow up, so a Cyclops with one breast, is that depicted as an exposed breast or
well, it's complicated because in Encyclopedia Exotica has, I wish I remember the name of the author, it's bugging me, but it has it's sort of a series of little vignettes of individual stories, and at times, yes, it does. Like the opening is it's set up as an encyclopedia about this group of people called the Cyclopses and their history and their anatomy and everything. And then partway through it, there's a female Cyclops who's become quite famous for being sort of the first Cyclops playgirl or playboy model. And she then sort of actually kind of walks out of the page, walks out of this very static encyclopedic page, and she's then naked with the one breast. But again, it depends on the characterization and the specific stories, because there are women who are clothed. Thank you, Aminder Dhaliwal. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. I want people to do a lot more work on it because it's so interesting.
So, but these are issues that seem not to occur to Homer in the Odyssey. And so, if somebody now is creating an Odyssey, there are matters that are coming up that don't belong to the Odyssey as it originally began, if we can speak in such terms.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a whole thing in that comic about how the Cyclopses, the women have, male Cyclopses have, I think, 2 phalluses, and female Cyclopses then have, I believe they have 1 womb, but they have a form of delayed implantation where they can be fertilized more than once in one sexual encounter, and then carry the secondary embryo until they've given birth to their first child, and then the second embryo implants and grows as a child. And so Dhaliwal, sorry, I keep forgetting her name, or pardon me, his name, but they really go into a lot of detail. They really extrapolate off of the mythological Cyclops, while still maintaining that as the clear origin. Like at one point, one of the characters is set up with a date with another character who's a Cyclops, and they're both Cyclopses. And he makes this comment of like, why would you think we're right for each other? What are we going to do? Sit around and talk about what an asshole Odysseus is? And so there's clearly this origin story, this story that still exists in this story world, but the author has just taken it and run with it. It's a wonder. Anyways, I'm going to stop talking about how awesome this comic is.
In your opinion, does that material, is it now part of the Odyssey?
That's
It's not part of Homer's Odyssey, but if the person who poses the question is illustrating an Odyssey, can that stuff become fair game?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if I think it's down to personal interpretation a lot of the time. I mean, as so many things are. I don't know if I read the Odyssey and will think about Polyphemus as having more than one phallus. Well, I probably will now that we're talking about it. But yeah, I think it's fully legitimate. Part of the thing with the Odyssey, though, is there's just so many comic interpretations of it, and so many different comic interpretations of the Cyclops. Like going back to what we were talking about before, Heavy Metal presents Ulysses, which was Heavy Metal it still is a comics magazine that works very much with science fiction, and they did a version of the Odyssey, obviously titling it Ulysses, and they make it this really interesting blend of science fiction and mythology, where the gods, very much actually like in Lore Olympus, where the gods have this are basically just people with superior technology to humans, and they sort of float around in this like mechanical castle. But the Cyclops in that is essentially just a big robot that has one eye that shoots out a laser, which is why it's a Cyclops. And so I think all of the interpretations are fully valid and worth study, if that makes sense, and can be read back into the Odyssey, and probably are subconsciously by people who have read all of these different things.
Well, there's that 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 saying that it's hard to unsee something, hard to unthink it, and that pertains nicely to matters of reception. I mean, now that I've seen Laura's Aries with those really nice thighs, I'm going to be noting that they don't exist in Hephaestus, in her Hephaestus. And it wasn't she went through a whole series of gods, but it wasn't until I saw the Aries that I started thinking, oh yeah, those thighs really matter there.
Yeah.
So it's this accumulative effect of reception that's quite remarkable.
Absolutely. It's fascinating. Anyways, thank you for letting me ramble on about comics.
Well, those of us who aren't drawing need something to do.
That's true.
Wow. I'm just reading Paula's message.
Yeah.
Crumbs. Wow. I can't picture that. That must
I
be
know.
Well, he was a premature twin, you see, so shades of Apollo and Artemis.
Yeah.
He and his twin sister were born so early in 1950. It was a bit of a makeshift surgery thing.
Oh, wow.
He always
never
identifies with Hephaestus and Vulcan, so I tend to.
Are you going to draw a representation of him?
Oh, I don't know about that. I was trying doing something. I was doing a poem, but it's not very good.
Oh. Trying to make an armchair look like it's made out of clouds, but it just looks really lumpy.
I still don't know how mine ends really, and I've got to the bottom of the page. The best thing about it is all the birds make the cakes. I think maybe I could do something just with the birds making the cakes.
I love that. I don't know where that's come from. That's brilliant.
No, I know.
Breakfast cake.
Oh, instead of the 4 and 20 blackbirds baked in a pie, the 4 and 20. No, I don't think it was that really, because it was supposed to be Aphrodite's dove, but she's brought all the birds to help make the cake. Look, they've got little spoons. It's the best, but the drawings are quite rough as usual. But I like the birds with the spoons. Can you see the birds with the
that's
spoons?
lovely. Oh,
Those
that's
are
so
wonderful.
great.
That's really cute. Plus, it's really obvious that they're birds with spoons, and they're clearly.
I know, that was the point.
like
I don't know
that.
what that one's doing though. It's spitting something into the bowl, which is probably a bit nasty. I wasn't quite sure how they put the ingredients in with having beaks and feet.
He's adding a special ingredient.
It's special, I'm sure it is. Right, I need to rewrite this with the birds doing more of an action, I think. It's all about the birds.
I've cheated a bit because last time I didn't get to my last panel, so I started with the last panel this time, and I nicked Amanda's story that she sent me about Mythopus.
Oh, Mythopus! Yay!
I haven't had a chance to draw him at all, and this is the end of the story where Mythopus ends up with Hestia, and I thought
that's
Hestia needs a
lovely.
really nice armchair, anachronistic as anything. So I'm trying to make it out of clouds, so it's by the hearth in Olympus.
Oh, I love that. That's so nice.
Very happy. As you should be, really. I mean, goddess of the hearth, you've got her right there.
Yeah. Oh.
So Alexander's heading off, but
Okay.
he just wanted to share. He had Hermes run around Olympus, and he's just seeing the other gods get up to weird stuff. And in the final panel, he concludes, "We're an odd bunch, aren't we?" I love it.
Wearing a small bag like in the game Hades. Oh, I really need to play the game Hades. I'm just relying on students to tell me actually what's in it.
Definitely.
But I think I might need to do that over Christmas. I like
It's
that.
a good way to pass the time.
We're an odd bunch, aren't we? Yeah, that's nice.
Laura, have you ever encountered George O'Connor's Olympian series of comics?
The name is really familiar. I'm going to look it up now.
Yeah, he's just putting out Dionysus, I think early 2022 as the last one, but he was a comics creator who
I've seen
who's done a wonderful series. Yeah.
Oh yes. Oh, I've heard of these, and then I hear about them I hear about them and then I don't hear about them again, and I haven't actually read any. As my brain is just full of holes these days. I don't know if I'm coming or going, and I think they're in my book list.
They're
which one day I will get. But yeah, now that you say it, I definitely remember this. But yeah, he doesn't have Twitter. If he was on Twitter, I'd probably know.
I know. Yeah,
everything's supposed to be my whole life should be on Twitter at the moment. But no, I'd quite like his style as well, because with the play of light and shadow, I really do like that.
Yes.
And there's a chap who, what is his name, who's doing right, I think he's just funded on Kickstarter his Theseus comic.
Oh my God, yes. Sorry, I've been a backer of that, and I just got asked for my address. I'm very excited about it.
Oh, cool. Now I can't find it. What is his name, Drat? So I really like his art style as well, but I haven't had a chance to sit down and read, and then I totally missed the Kickstarter altogether.
Oh no.
But I'm sure I will. No, I can't find him now. It'll pop up.
Jordan Holt.
Thank you. Holt.
There's another wonderful one you might like. That's
Holt, the illustrator. There we go.
It's the 13th Labor. I can't remember the illustrator of that either, but it's about Heracles finishing his 12th labor and then being told he has to do one more, and coming to the future and meeting his like great times a million descendant who has to then he then has to sort of like train her to go and fight as a champion of Earth. It's fun, and it's a similar art style to Holt, so you might like it.
I found it. Fazil Iskander, is that right?
I think that's it. Yes.
Okay, I'm adding it to my list, which, if I'm lucky, I've already added Cyclopedia Exotica to that list.
Excellent. Yay.
Every time we do a workshop, my list gets longer. Thank goodness.
And I'm sorry I got distracted here, but Hugh, thank you so much for sharing yours. Everybody, if you want to check it out, Hugh's shared Mercury and Aeneas in the chat.
Thanks. It's goofy.
Oh, I'm just reading.
Fantastic.
Hang on, I've lost it. Hang on, come back here. Pass it, maybe. I love that in the last panel, and like Aeneas is like rubbing his arms and his eyes are all like waking up. That's really cool. Oh, and the dream disappearing. That's awesome. I really like that. Oh,
Thank you.
I was just teaching the word spelunkam yesterday. That's so nice. Oh, who was telling me that they were going to do something about that same scene? Someone was doing something about Hermes or Mercury going down and talking to, and I can't remember what I was talking about with someone.
In my last year at school, one of my classmates did a parody of Dryden's Aeneid, and like with that scene, and I think possibly the best part of it was her rhyming Jupiter with stupider.
Oh. Oh, it's very, very sweet.
I wish I still had it. I might. No, there's no way. It's like probably a floppy disk in a landfill somewhere by now. But
Oh, I would like that. All the stuff that we draw and we forget about, we throw away. It's so sad.
Yeah,
I really like that. I've still only drawn one entire panel, but she's got a fire now. I'm right, I'm going to show my panel and then maybe trying to think about how the rest of the story went, Amanda. I remember him going and trying out the other gods, so I'll draw
check it out. Yeah. Oh, brilliant. No, it's
I know you
lovely
sent it
that.
to me. See if I can find it, but not quite playing ball here.
Yeah. So for anybody at the last workshop, I had this idea about Mythopus was going around the Olympian gods asking if she could be their cat, whether they needed an animal, and got turned away at loads of places because they already had an animal or they were allergic to cats or other reasons. And so then Mythopus finally finds, I don't know, is it a she or a he cat? I'm not sure. Finds their way to Hestia and lives happily ever after by the hearth.
Yeah. So I'm going to draw. I have to draw lots of cats now. That's a bit different to what we were doing.
What we were planning, yes. Yeah. Yeah, I need to redraw this. I've decided Athena's really mean to Hestia, but because Hestia feeds the birds and Athena doesn't, so Athena only feeds the crows by dead people in warfare, maybe, or is that a bit dark? Anyway, I'll come up with some reason why these birds are making the cakes. So we kind of said we'd draw to a close after half an hour. So I know some people have been doing a lot of lovely drawing, and some people have been doing silly drawing like me. So have we got anything to share? I haven't done mine.
My camera is less than ideal, and so I think I'm just going to share mine in the shared drive if anybody is interested.
Yeah, I'll do mine in the shared drive. So I suppose bringing us back, and I know if you're in the middle of drawing, you probably don't want to come back to the room or the virtual room, but just interested how everybody found the exercises and actually got to be doing a bit of drawing. Did we have, I really enjoyed the drawing the temple because it just really makes you stop thinking, as Hannah was saying, stop being so worried about it and just get something on the page. And sometimes that's just what you need to do and then redraft it. So it would be really good to get some feedback and whether some of this is something that could be used in the classroom, or have you enjoyed it? What did you find about it? Any feedback would be nice.
I'm effectively still looking at pictures of cats now.
So do you think, is Mythopus a boy or a girl or a transgender cat?
I wasn't going to, as my students say, are you assuming my gender? I wasn't going to assume Mythopus's gender at all. It's a cat.
Yeah, it's the cat. Okay, that's fine.
Anyone, but yeah, it's difficult when you try and write the story and which pronouns you pick.
Yeah.
You don't really want to
write the story and see what fits the cat.
Yeah.
Once we've done it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking of Mythopus as a he, but I don't know why really. I suppose I was thinking of my cat Hector, maybe.
Yeah. I've only owned boy cats, so in a way, cats are boys to me.
Yeah.
Although it's weird that cats, and if you have cats or dogs can tend to be then gendered as male and cats as
cats as female. Why is that? It's one of the weird things.
Is it a weird female capricious nature thing?
Oh.
I was just thinking back to like the bee woman and the pig woman, and who was that? Is that Virgil? It's not Virgil, is it? Oh, that's going to annoy me now. the sort of types of women via ancient Greek types of women. So maybe not.
Oh, Simonides, somebody's
Is
saying
it?
in the chat.
I haven't read that in such a long time. And the bee woman bustling about her day.
Yes, it is, isn't it? Yeah. How annoying.
The cat woman knocking things off a shelf. Pooping in your shoes.
That'd be mine, actually. Actually, my female cat is quite horrible. The male cat's fairly horrible. The female cat is very horrible. So.
I've done a cat.
Have we got the oh, lovely.
Oh, I love it.
His face. He's a he. I've just named him. He's a he. There we are. Right. Sorry. Cats everywhere.
Tammy just answered your question, Amanda, in the chat. Tammy Jo Eckhart, I should say. And she said that depending on the class, this could be a great creative way to get students to think about myths and legends. I could see it working best for a more artistic group versus a general group of students, or perhaps it makes an optional way to do an assignment, create a cartoon, write a story, or write an essay. I think those are great ideas.
We do use that in class a fair bit. I mean, I try not to overdo it a bit, but one of the reasons why I started doing the comics in the first place is because it was always a really great, sometimes a homework, but it's nicer actually in a class environment where everyone's joining in. And before we actually had classics and we only had Latin in the school and we were teaching the Cambridge Latin course, it was always the story Felix et Fur, where in the story Felix, the reason why Felix the slave was then freed and now he's a freedman is because once a thief, a fur, came in and Felix punched the thief who was trying to abduct the baby. And so they've got to translate the story, but then also pick out the most important Latin sentences to tell the story and then arrange them in a comic. And we always had such delightful responses to that. But they're always really straightforward and in blocks. Or as one big picture, which was always quite fun. And then with the classics, on that side, with teaching, it tended to be things that were formulaic so that they could remember them. So like arming formula or the what do we call it, the Aristeia of Achilles, like the different steps in the Aristeia. One of my pupils who I started drawing with, we were sort of goading each other on, he's now an animator, but that was the first thing that he did. And that really helped because you are, again, it's getting you, we sort of talked about this when we talked about picking out points for story and then what do you put in your panels. It is getting you to focus on the most pertinent parts of the story or the myth or the formula. And the visual nature of learning, sort of dual coding, putting the words with the image really does make it very, very memorable for a lot of students. So it's an ideal learning tool, as long as you don't make absolutely everything about drawing comics. Otherwise, it becomes a very different lesson altogether. But it is, yeah, really, really useful. So
some really good comments coming through. So Meredith saying about filmmaking, which is thinking about storyboarding is a really good way of doing it. And for customers, for students less comfortable speaking in class, I think that's a good point. Interestingly, after our Being Human session, one of the participants, Julia, is a student as a postgrad student at Liverpool, got in touch with me after the session and said she'd really like to do a comic drawing kind of every other week. Somebody does something and then and share it across the archaeology team. And actually I do have, although I feel really bad for this, so I don't know if you've got anybody from Liverpool on, but I've got an honorary associateship at Liverpool as well, and I only use it for the Zoom account and being able to watch certain things on TV because I've always felt aligned to the Open University where I did my PhD. But actually, so I've said I'm quite happy to actually do something for Liverpool for once, for having this associateship and kind of be the, help them and write some pieces for them. So hopefully in the new year that'll get going, and the idea is that it'll start in Liverpool and then we'll bring it out to invite more people. And so I thought that was really great that we inspired a postgrad student to think about that and how they could use comics across and it's Liverpool's classics, archaeology, Egyptology, so it's a wider kind of discipline now. So I thought that was really good, so I'll keep everybody appraised of that through AIMS, how it's going and as and when it gets started. But I thought that was really good. That's a way of students taking the ownership of it.
Yeah.
we did kind of a mini version of that on Twitter. Sort of accidentally started Classicstober, so it's alternative to Inktober. And I can't remember, did we do the other workshop before or after or during that?
During, I think.
It was during, wasn't it? And I got a bit distracted because we were enjoying so much, and so many people joined in, and either doing comics or, again, kind of like an image in a whole story in one image, which was really, really nice. So people who hadn't necessarily done drawing a long time or hadn't picked up a pen ever were just throwing themselves into it, which is really cool. So maybe they could, if we do it again next year, maybe they could all join in with that as well, which would be really fun. They'll have honed their skills by that point.
Yeah, no, that would be amazing. And I think, you know, it's really great to be invited back to do something like this at Ames again, like the creative writing last year. And actually, it's quite nice to be able to do something with the wider group, you know, like the being human thing with members of the community. And actually the creative writing I did as part of Brighton Fringe as well this year, but the trouble with Brighton Fringe is it's quite expensive to get a listing. So Being Human is kind of a free festival for universities, so I'd have to get funding to do Brighton again, but it's really good to do it with the general public and with colleagues here and sharing what we've learned. So it'd be quite nice to have a regular, if we're always going to have an Ames conference or a meeting, we could have a regular creative slot. That would be good.
That would be wonderful, yeah.
Ames Draw-a-thon.
Yeah.
I do just want to read out a couple of the other comments, if that's okay. Because you got some more responses to your question, Amanda. Hugh noted that he lets students who are less comfortable speaking in class make art as an alternative way of showing engagement, which I think is personally really wonderful. Oh, sorry, my cat is trying to knock over my computer. And then Pushpa noted that it was a fun and interesting experience, so thank you so much for that. They got to know a lot about comics and works they didn't know about to read for Christmas. Definitely. They tried the stick figure character for comic making, but it ended up as a combination of stick figure and manga art style, which I have to say, I read out the whole comment because I really want to see it now.
Yeah, we need to please share in the Google Drive.
And Paula noted as a response to Meredith that Ovid really storyboards out Pygmalion story if you read the Metamorphoses. And yeah, you're right. I just reread it for my fan fiction entry for this conference, and it definitely, I think you're right on, Paula. So thank you everybody for your comments. Keep them coming.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I guess we're getting towards the end time. So did anybody have anything final to share?
I just want to say, please don't be shy about sharing your work, because I love seeing what everybody's done.
Yeah, I'll share my little bird. So if I share my birds with spoons, then I'm sure everybody else will have something more artistically, more aesthetically pleasing than the birds with spoons.
If you haven't checked it out, Hannah's uploaded hers in the Drive, and it's really lovely. It's very it reminded me of Aesop for some reason, but it's just a lovely little story.
Yeah, I think I was thinking a bit Bagpuss, like anyone used to watch Bagpuss, but there were all these little stories, you know, or songs they would have in this kids show. And
where's my Bagpuss? I'll get him out.
And often kind of reinventions of old myths. Sort of simplified or kind of riffing off, Aesop's and other myths. So sort of origin story of how the birds came about. And there she is. Because in my story, the trees are bored of listening to their own voices, sighing to one another. So Mavis makes the birds from leaves and mosses and brings them to life. And then the forest is full of song.
That's lovely.
There's another question. Sorry,
another question. No, that's all right. Let's have the question before we finish.
There was just a question from, I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher this pronunciation, but Anise Bastiao. They ask, when the artist is doing a comic about the Iliad or the Odyssey, do they base it on classical art or contemporary art? For example, do they draw clothing based on the vases, or do they use their imagination or literary reference, or what literary references to do that? Also, do they import other pictures or scenes from modern times to the comics? And my short answer to that is yes, they do both. It's really quite varied what they do. There's a wonderful artist slash comics artist named Gareth Hines, who does some really great interpretations of classical literature. And I don't just mean classical as in ancient, but various. He has a wonderful comic of King Lear, for example. And he has done both the Iliad and the Odyssey. And he works with watercolors, and he goes for more of a classic look, not in that they look like ancient art, but in that he tries to present the ancient world as it would have been if he pays a lot of attention to historical accuracy. So does oh gosh, I can't remember his first name, but Shanower did part of a series called The Age of Bronze based on the Trojan War, and he again really tried to look to historical research to make it more accurate. But then again, you get people who just really go off the wall, like Heavy Metal Presents Ulysses. If you've seen the Lou Ferrigno Herculeses, it's very much in that kind of vein, except with a lot more breasts. And it's clearly designed for a male gaze. Or you get, again, Matt Fraction and Christian Ward's Odyssey, which is clearly inspired by heavy metal and sort of the 1970s psychedelic aesthetic. And they just go completely the other direction with it, where bright colors, it's almost like an acid trip. It really barrages your senses, and very modern art. And then you get other wonderful things. I know I'm going to beat this into the ground, but I'm currently kind of obsessed with Wonder Woman Historia, because it just came out maybe.
Yeah, mine hasn't come yet, Natalie. Yeah, it's coming in the post soon.
Oh, I was very fortunate. There's a comic book store here that I go to get issues so that I don't have to rely on the post. And they had sold out, but the woman knows me. And so was nice enough to give me a copy that was on hold, which was, and I'm so grateful, because it's just, anyways, I'm sorry, I'm going to stop squeeing about all of this stuff. But in Wonder Woman Historia, it uses a very modern art form, but it brings in classical art. So there's, you know what, I'm going to go grab it so I can show you. I can remember where it is. Oh, no, my cat's unhappy. I'll be right back.
Okay, cool. Because I guess we will have to wrap up in a couple of minutes, but it'd be good to see it. So while Natalie's just getting that, please, the Google Drive is open. Please share in that, and love to see how if you take things forward after, if you've got a really good idea and want to redraw it, be interested in that too. Okay, quick look then.
Yeah, sorry, I did hear you, and I know I just get distracted. But for example, in one of the opening pages, they just demonstrate the treatment of women through time by using a series of amphorae. And then later on, when the goddesses are actually creating the Amazons and Themyscira, if I can find it, they very clearly make reference to ancient statuary in the goddesses' forms. But again, if you just look at the imagery, it's clearly ancient statuary with very modern interpretations. So it's a huge question, and it really varies quite dramatically depending on what the artists are trying to do. So like final comment, and then I know we have to go, Amanda, but like Gareth Hines really writes for the classroom, whereas something like Wonder Woman Historia is for a more general audience, but clearly still tapping into that history and mythology. All right.
Cool. So we'll all check it out. Looking forward to reading it when it comes through the post, Natalie. So thanks so much, everybody, for taking part. Google Drive, please put your stuff in. And actually, in terms of capturing the chat, is somebody capturing the chat?
I will. I'll do my best to do that.
Fabulous.
Roger
Thanks
speaking.
so much. Thank you, Roger.
Okay.
Brilliant.
Right.
So thanks, everyone. And hopefully see you again soon for the next panel. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Amanda. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks so much for having me.